All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. This channel is for educational purposes, and we check out great theories, concepts, and discoveries that you're probably not familiar with because they've been suppressed. The powers that be don't want you to know these things, and they're also rather difficult, of an esoteric nature, and maybe a little bit emotionally difficult to deal with as well because they strike at some of our cherished beliefs that we haven't scrutinized enough yet. And so this is number 408 of our Bible Decode series. And we have explored a lot of the various aspects of the Roman origins hypothesis for the New Testament. That is, that the Romans are the true authors of the New Testament. The New Testament was a psychological operation done by the Romans against the Jews. The Jews, especially the zealous Jews, the ones that were the most kind of aggressive and militant. And the Jews had been a big pain in the side of the Romans for over 100 years, ever since the Romans had occupied Judea in 63 BC. And powers that be just wanted the Jews to be more um, tame, more domesticated, more assimilated. The Jews saw themselves as the chosen people, people apart, and they had all of these strictures and rituals that many of them were willing to die for. And the Romans in general were very religiously tolerant. They wanted you to practice your own religion, but they wanted you to, you know, also revere Caesar. And that's kind of where a lot of the rub lied with the Jews. Their strictures against graven images didn't go over well when Emperor Caligula attempted to install a statue of himself in the temple of Jerusalem. That led to practically a full-on war. And then there was a full-on war in 66 AD um, when a few self-proclaimed Jewish messiahs, um, responding to prophecies in some of the Old Testament books for a Jewish Messiah to rise up that was a military commander to deliver the Jews from the occupying power, in this case, the Romans. And literally, um, these Jewish messiahs rose up and overthrew the Roman puppet leader there in Jerusalem and sent him packing back to Rome, um, leaving the Jews with a short amount of sovereignty in their own nation until Emperor Nero sent in the army. The Roman army, the legions, several legions with um, under the leadership of General Vespasian. And but still, it took the Romans 7 years to put down the Jews, but put them down they did, and also the utter destruction of Jerusalem. But still, Vespasian, who becomes the new emperor in 69 AD, and his son Titus, who was appointed general under uh, in place of Vespasian, who eventually also becomes a new emperor after Vespasian dies, his father. They were both wounded in this war, and they both recognized the resiliency of the Jews, that they were always going to be coming back, that they were always a threat to revolt. And so they reached into their tried and tested bag of psychological operations. The Romans had literally created a number of other religions at this very time. And so this is no outlier, but they decided to create a fictional story of a Jewish Messiah who was not a military commander, but instead was a prince of peace and believed in rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, walking the extra mile, and um, turning the other cheek to oppression, while at the same time being highly critical of the Jewish traditions and rituals when he overturned the tables of the money changers at the temple and castigated the Jewish um, merchants who were selling small animals at the temple, and telling his disciples that they needed to, his Jewish disciples, that they needed to abandon their families to follow him. These are things that, these are the exact things that the Romans would have written had it been a psyop. And then, as we go further along in the New Testament into the epistles, Paul is even more deferential to the Romans and even more critical of the Jews. Again, just like the Roman doctor would have ordered it. And but the real evidence comes when you look in the work of Josephus, and you see that his 7-volume work of a history of this war between the Romans and the Jews is nothing but a template for and really a script, an intertextual script for the New Testament. Josephus was originally Jewish, but defected to the Romans and lived his last few decades of his life at Caesar's palace in a townhouse as a member of the Roman royal court. The dynasty there, Vespasian, Titus, and Titus's younger brother Domitian, those 3 emperors, they're called the Flavian emperors, and they adopted Josephus as a member of their family. And so Josephus is known as Flavius. Josephus, and incidentally, the word Flavius or Flavian means golden, kind of like the golden age that we're being ushered into. So just keep that in mind. And so Josephus, whoever he was, is also the author of the New Testament, at least the Gospels. The comparisons, the parallels, and the satire, the mockery, and the jokes are all laid bare when you look at Josephus alongside the Gospels. Now, when the Romans made the New Testament, they put in everything that they could to convince you that it was a real religion. I think that Josephus was probably like a think tank of Roman intellectuals, because the Gospels and the New Testament in general is incredibly diverse in its influences. But indeed, it was influences. There was nothing original there in the New Testament. It's all from older sources, all from ancient Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Persian, Indian, Chinese, Japanese, um, mythology and religion. Also, maybe some Sumerian, maybe some Pygmy, and even some uh, Mexican um, influences. Uh, Astrology, Stoicism, paganism, numerology, shamanism, all of it's in there. None of it is original. All of it has much older antecedents. And the author that we're looking at today documents some of this in his book, 16 Crucified Saviors Before Christianity. And this is the author named Kersey Graves. This is his 1876 book. And I think this is chapter 32 that we're in. And chapter 32 documents the 346 similarities between Krishna and Christ, one of which is just the name. They're both pretty much the same, Krishna and Christ. Krishna is an Indian deity, savior, messiah, who dates back from 1200 BC at least. So at least 1200 years before Jesus. So we know which way the influence goes there. And he just got done listing all 346 of these similarities. And we're going to pick up right here where he goes into some testimony from Colonel Weissman, who was for 10 years a Christian missionary in India. There is one Indian Hindu legend of considerable importance, says this writer. This is the story of Krishna, the Indian Apollo. In native legends, he is represented as an avatar or incarnation of the divinity. At his birth, choirs of angels or devas, sung hymns of praise while shepherds surrounded his cradle. It was necessary to conceal his birth from the tyrant ruler Kansa, to whom it had been foretold that the infant Savior should destroy him. The child escaped with his parents beyond the coast of Lamuna. For a time he lived in obscurity, and then commenced a public life distinguished for prowess and beneficence. He washed the feet of the Brahmins and preached the most excellent doctrines, but at length the power of his enemies prevailed. Before dying, he foretold the miseries which would take place in the Kali Yuga, or wicked age of the world. Krishna, that's the end of his quote there. Krishna, says another writer, taught his followers that they alone were the true believers of the saving faith, throwing down the barriers of caste and elevating the dogmas of their faith above the sacerdotal class. He admitted everyone who felt an inward desire to the ministry, to the to the preaching of their religion. A system thus associating itself with the habits, feelings, and personal advantages of his disciples could not fail to make rapid progress. Going on, Buddhism inculcates benevolence, tenderness, forgiveness of injuries, and love of enemies, and forbids sensuality, love of pleasure, and attachment to worldly objects. At the moment of his conception, a god left heaven to enter the womb of his mother, a virgin. Immediately after his birth, he was recognized as a divine personage, and it was predicted that he would surpass all previous divine incarnations in holiness. Everyone adored him, saluting him as the God of gods. When 20 years of age, he went into a desert and lived there in the austerest retirement, poverty, simplicity, and virtue, spending his whole time in religious contemplation. He was tempted in various ways, but his self denial resisted all the seductive approaches of sin. He declared, "Religion is my essence." He experienced a lively opposition from the priests attached to the ancient creeds, but he triumphed over all his enemies after holding a discussion with them. He revised the existing code of morals and the social law. He reduced the main principles of morality to four, that is, mercy, aversion to cruelty, unbounded sympathy for all animated beings, and the strictest adherence to the moral law. He also gave a decalogue of commandments, that is, not to kill, not to steal, not to be chaste, not to testify falsely, not to lie, not to swear, to avoid all impure words, to be disinterested, not to take revenge, and not to be superstitious. This code of morals was firmly established in the hearts of his followers. And that's all from Hardy's Manual of Buddhism. Now, this is all, I don't quite get this because this is an earlier period before Buddhism, and this is really Hinduism, but they refer to Buddhism a lot here. But Buddha, so-called, which I don't believe that Buddha existed either, but if he did, it would have been like 600 BC. I'm not sure. I think back in the 19th century, there wasn't such a distinction here for Westerners trying to study up on Indian philosophy and religion. Okay, going on. It was prophesied in olden times that a person would arise and redeem Hindustan from the yoke of bondage. At midnight, when the birth of Krishna was taking place, the clouds emitted low music and poured down a rain of flowers. The celestial child was greeted with hymns by attending spirits. The room was illuminated by his light, and the countenances of his father and mother emitted rays of glory, and they bowed in worship. The people believed he was a god. They eagerly caught the words which fell from his lips, which taught his divine mission. And they called him the Holy One, and finally, the living God. He performed miraculous cures. At his birth, a marvelous light illumined the earth. His followers baptized and performed miraculous cures. And he, when a child, attracted attention by his miracles. While attending the herds with his foster father, a great serpent poisoned the river, which caused the death of cows and shepherd boys when they drank of it, whom Krishna restored to life by a look of divine power. His life was devoted to mercy and charity. He left paradise from pure compassion to die for suffering sinners. He sought to lead them to better paths and lives of virtue and rectitude. He suffered to atone for the sins of the world, and the sinner, through faith in him, can be saved. Christ and Krishna both taught the equality of man. Prayers addressed to Krishna were after this fashion. Quote, O thou Supreme One, thy essence is inscrutable. Thou art all in all. The understanding of man cannot reach thy almighty power. I, who know nothing, fly to thee for protection. Show mercy unto me, and enable me to see and know thee. Krishna replies, have faith in me. No one who worships me can perish. Address thyself to me as the only asylum. I will deliver thee from sin. I am animated with equal benevolence toward all beings. I know neither hatred nor partiality. Those who adore me devoutly are in me, and I in them. Christ within you, the hope of glory. If we consider that Buddhism proclaimed the equality of all men and women in the sight of God, that it denounced the impious pretensions of the most mischievous priesthood the world ever saw, and that it inculcated a pure system of practical morality, we must admit that the innovation was as advantageous as it was extensively spread and adopted. To Krishna, the Hindus were indebted for a code of pure and practical morality, which inculcated charity and chastity, performance of good works, abstinence from evil, and general kindness to all living things. Buddhism never confounds right and wrong and never excuses any sin. Krishna honored humanity by his virtues. These are quotes from different writers here. This is from Hardy. It is probable that every incident in Krishna's life is founded in fact, which, if separated from surrounding fable, would afford a history that would scarce have an equal in the importance of the lessons it would teach. And here is something from Saint Hilaire. Krishna undertakes and counsels a constant struggle against the body. In his eyes, the body is the enemy of man's soul. He aims to subdue the body and the burning passions which consume it. He requires humility, disregard of worldly wealth, patience, and resignation in adversity, love to enemies, religious tolerance, horror at falsehood, avoidance of frivolous conversation, consideration and esteem for women, sanctity of the marriage relation, non-resistance to evil, confession of sins, and conversion. This is from Abel Remusat. Buddhism has been called the Christianity of the East. And here we have something from Reverend H. Malcolm. The doctrine and practical piety of their Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, bear a strong resemblance to those of the Holy Scriptures. It has scarcely a precept or principle that is not found in the Christian Bible. And were the people to live up to its principles of peace and love, oppression and injury would be known no more within their borders. It has no mythology of obscene and ferocious deities, no sanguinary or impure observances, no self inflicting tortures, no tyrannizing priesthood, no confounding of right and wrong by making certain iniquities laudable in worship. In its moral code, its description of the purity and peace of the first ages, and the shortening of man's life by sin, it seems to follow genuine traditions. In almost every respect, it seems to be the best religion ever invented by man. And here we have a quote from Upham, which is, if the morality of Buddhism be examined, its exhortations to guard the will, to curb the thoughts, to exercise kindness toward others, to abstain from wrong to all, it propounds a very high standard of practice. And here is another quote from Reverend Hardy. And, oh, I'm sorry, this is actually from Bjorngerma. It seeks the highest triumphance of humanity in the exercise of devotion, self-contemplation, and self-denial. And here is Reverend Hardy. And the doctrines of Buddhism are not alone in the beauty of their sentiments and the excellence of much of their morality. It is not permitted to you to return evil for evil, is one of the sentiments of Socrates. And here we have from Smith, from Tibergian. Buddhism insists on the necessity of taking the intellectual faculties for guides in philosophical researches. And here's from Smith. It sought to wean mankind from the pleasures and vanities of life by pointing to the transitoriness of all human enjoyment. And he goes on, the principal characteristics of Buddhism are the doctrines of mildness and the universal brotherhood of man. Returning to Upham, life is a state of probation and misery according to Buddhism. And to Hook, who says, the Brahmins found fault with Krishna for receiving as disciples the outcasts of Hindu society. But Krishna replied, my law is a law of mercy to all. And he goes on, Buddhism attracted and furnished consolation for the poor and unfortunate. And Landress says, Buddhism is a rationalistic and reform system as compared with Brahmanism. Landress expresses his high admiration of the heroism with which the Buddhist missionaries before Christ crossed streams and seas which had arrested armies and traversed deserts and mountains upon which no caravans dared to venture, and braved dangers and surmounted obstacles which had defied the omnipotence of the emperors. And then from Hook again, we have, if we addressed a Mughal or Tibetan this question, who is Krishna? The reply was instantly, the savior of men. Coming from a book of Asiatic researches, said Krishna, the incarnate deity of the Sanskrit romance, continues to this hour the darling god of the women of India. Krishna was the person of Vishnu, God himself, in the human form. And going on, respectable natives told me that some of the missionaries had told them that they were even now almost Christians, owing to the two religions being so nearly alike. And Robert Shane says all that converting the Hindus to Christianity does for them is to change the object of their worship from Krishna to Christ. Okay, I think we're going to stop right there. He's going to get into a little bit of a longer passage here coming up, and we will start with that when we return tomorrow. So, but I think the point is made here that whatever is going on with Krishna is eerily similar to whatever was going on in the New Testament. And, some of that stuff could be coincidental. Morals are universal, you would think, and that different groups of people would arrive at the same type of, um, code of morality. But some of the similarities are a little bit too specific, I think, to be random or coincidental. When you look at his list of 346 similarities, we'll just say that 3 out of 4 of them are, uh, you know, discarded. You still have 86 of them that are similar, and that's still a large number. So, I just feel like um, that goes way beyond um, coincidence, and it really just shows that the Romans were using Krishna as a model, as one of the main models for their uh, psychological operation that we know of as the New Testament. Okay, like, share, subscribe, comment, contribute, and we'll see you next time. Please come back for episode number 409 of the Bible Decode series on Wild Tangent. Thanks for tuning in today. Have a great day.